Good everyone. We'll be starting our webinar in about 1 minute. We'll just let you get settled up in your stations and your computers. Good morning, and thank you for attending our webinar this morning. Today's session is going to be interactive and informative session clarifying facts and fiction on decommissioning the WR-1 reactor. My name is Keith Borkowski, and I will be facilitating today's session. Along with me is Brian Wilcox, Director of the WR-1 Reactor Decommissioning Project, and Jeff Miller, our Technical Lead and Manager of Regulatory Approvals for the WR-1 project. This session is planned to last about 1 hour, including a question and answer period. Questions may be typed into the question and answer window located at the bottom of your Zoom webinar screen at any time during the webinar. We will answer them at the end of the session. Alternatively, you may email questions to wlcommunications@cnl.ca for follow-up after today's session. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Jeff, I'll pass it over to you to kick off.
Thanks, Keith. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on WR-1 decommissioning. This webinar is just part of a series of webinars designed to provide information about the project and help enable two-way dialogue through questions and answers. So it has been a while since we had a webinar here, so I am excited to see everybody with us today. For those of you who haven't had a chance of attending one of our sessions before and not necessarily familiar with the project, we'll first give you a quick overview before you jump into the presentation. And to do that, we're going to show you an introductory video, which should give you a brief overview of WR-1 and what the proposed in-situ disposal of it looks like.
The WR-1 reactor at the Whiteshell Laboratories near Pinawa, Manitoba was built in 1965. It is a low-power research reactor that was used to test the operation of heavy water moderation and organic coolant. WR-1 operated until 1985, when it was safely shut down and all fuel was removed. It has remained in a safe storage with surveillance state for 31 years, allowing the radiation to decay. The WR-1 reactor is proposed for in-situ decommissioning because it is primarily located below grade and the majority of contamination is in the reactor core. The entire below-grade portion will be filled with a grout, which secures the radioactive material in a structurally long-lived material, allowing it to decay and inhibiting release to the environment. The above-grade building will be demolished and all material sent to appropriate disposal sites. An engineered cover will then be installed over the grouted monolith to protect against intrusion. This solution provides a permanent disposal of the reactor, ensuring protection of workers, the public, and the environment.
Now, we did pay a lot of money to make that video, so we always love to show it off when we can. Now, WR-1 was shut down safely in 1985 when it did complete its research mission and has been carefully maintained and stored with surveillance ever since. So CNL is proposing to reduce the nuclear liability of the site by decommissioning WR-1 using a combination of dismantling and in-situ disposal. Now, through many of our public and Indigenous engagements on this project, we've heard some great questions and some concerns about the project, and today we want to share some of those with you. So today's going to be much more interactive than our previous webinars. We're going to go through a series of statements related to things we've heard about our project, and we're going to ask you if you think that they're fact or fiction, and ask you to try and guess. You'll see a pop-up window with each one of these questions that you can select your answer, and we'll see how well you guys know our project. Now, as we move through these questions and these statements, if at any time you have an additional question, something that's not part of this, oh no, the screen is only black because I haven't moved to the next slide. As we move through these questions, if you have everything else, drop it into the Q&A, and we'll circle back at the end of the presentation here to answer any questions you might have and any concerns you may have with the project still. So to kick things off, the first statement today, fact or fiction? In situ disposal has never been done before in the nuclear industry. In situ disposal has never been done before in the nuclear industry. Is that fact or is that fiction? So you should be able to see the poll on your screen now, and you should be able to cast your vote. In situ disposal has never been done before in the nuclear industry. Fact or fiction? I see them rolling in. We got just about everybody answered, but we'll cut it off here for those who may not be willing to watch an answer today. So as the results show, 92% of you say that is fiction. And you would be correct. Fiction. In situ disposal has absolutely been done before at a number of nuclear sites worldwide since the 1960s. Several examples include reactors in Hallam, Nebraska, 2 reactors at the Savannah River National Lab site in the United States, the Bonus reactor in Puerto Rico, and Piqua reactor in Ohio. We were actually able to organize a bit of a field trip for several of our public and indigenous communities that were interested in what in situ disposal actually looked like, and we took them down to Hallam, Nebraska. We were able to walk them around on the cap and cover of it, talk to the Department of Energy environmental monitors who monitor the site, and even speak to some of the local community representatives to talk about how having the reactor in their community has affected them or not affected them. So absolutely, it is fiction. It has been done before successfully. Now, the next question, fact or fiction? According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, entombment should never be used for disposal of nuclear facilities. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, entombment should never be used for nuclear facilities. So I'll let you guys cast your votes. Is that fact or fiction? Now, this is a statement we do hear a lot, so. All right, the results are in. It is unanimous. You guys think that is fiction, and you would be correct. So according to the IAEA, entombment in which all or part of the facility is encased in a structurally long-lived material should only be considered a solution under exceptional circumstances. And we agree with that. We agree entombment is not considered a decommissioning strategy in most cases, but the design and construction of the White Shell reactor disposal facility goes beyond simple entombment and actually creates a compliant and safe waste disposal facility. So the reactor, it's been in deferred decommissioning for 35 years. The safety case demonstrates that we can do this safely, and the risks of this are lower than some of the other viable options for doing this, just in terms of worker safety and the amount of industrial hazards that are present. So anything we do here goes beyond simple decommissioning. It now has to be a safe and compliant waste disposal facility, which has its own IAEA safety regulations and guidelines, as well as CNSC regulations and guidelines that we are bound to require to meet in order to move forward with the project. The next statement, fact or fiction? CNL's proposal for in situ disposal will contaminate the river and affect drinking water for residents downstream. CNL's proposal for in situ disposal will contaminate the river and affect drinking water for residents downstream. Is that fact or is that fiction? Results starting to come in. Give people a couple more seconds to cast their votes. Is that fact or fiction? All right. And results are in, again, unanimous. You guys think that is fiction, and again, you would be correct. So the majority of the radioactivity that's left in the WR-1 facility is embedded within the metals of the reactor core. Those are stainless steel and zirconium alloys, which take tens of thousands of years to corrode. We show through our safety case that over the lifetime of the facility, more than 99.9% of the radioactivity in the core and the rest of the facility is never released to the environment. It's all retained within the structure and decays away in place. Some of the other benefits in that the thick walls of the facility now create barriers that further slow the movement of contaminants in groundwater, and the grout itself will actually create an alkaline groundwater environment, which has the added benefit of making the already low corrosion rates even lower. Same with solubility rates for more soluble nuclides. So all of these combined ensure that the facility maintains containment over the entire lifetime of the facility. The next statement, fact or fiction? If the radioactive materials are in the metals of the reactor core, is it safer to remove those components from the reactor to be stored at another site in Canada? If the radioactive materials are in the metals, is it not safer to remove the components from the reactor to be stored at another site in Canada? Fact or fiction? I might have accidentally given away the answer to this one on a previous slide, so we'll see if you guys were listening. See the results coming in here. And results show everyone agrees, fiction. That is correct. So yes, all the radioactivity is in the reactor core, and yes, we could remove the reactor core safely. However, nothing is without risk. Right now, the primary risk, despite what people might think on our site, isn't really radiological risk. It's standard industrial risk. So working confined spaces, working at heights, cutting, hoisting and rigging, other ways for people to get injured other than from radioactivity. So removing that reactor core, while it can be done safely, both from an industrial and a radiological standpoint, it does require a significant amount of risk on the worker's part. And the caveat to all of that is that even if we took it out of the facility here, there really is no place to put it. It would just go into storage somewhere else. So with the risks involved in removing it and it being safe right where it is, it actually does not make sense to remove this material and transfer it somewhere else for long-term storage, because we show it can be left safe right where it is without incurring any of those additional industrial risks. Fact or fiction? In-situ disposal of WR-1 will render the entire Whiteshell laboratory site unusable after the facility is closed. In-situ disposal of WR-1 will render the entire Whiteshell laboratory site unusable after the facility is closed. Is that fact or is that fiction? Results coming in. You guys might be seeing a trend in some of these responses. And the results, again, you guys are on top of things today. You all agree, yes, that is fiction. Once we've finished decommissioning the rest of the Whiteshell site, there will be more than 10,000 acres of land that will be available for potential reuse. Most of the site was actually unaffected by operations, and so would be available or suitable for other uses, including as low as agricultural or residential use. Only about 0.5% of the site is actually going to remain under institutional control with the most severe restrictions on development. Other parts of the site will be classified as industrial or commercial use, but realistically, all of the site will continue to be owned by AECL, and it will be up to them to decide how they would like to utilize the space or release it for other uses going forward. But as far as the restrictions on what that looks like, only 0.5% of it is really going to be at that most restrictive level where it would be unusable to somebody else. And that's just strictly so that we can maintain control of the site and ensure that monitoring is carried out properly. The next one, fact or fiction? Before proceeding with the project, CNL must receive a license from an independent regulator. Before proceeding with the project, CNL must receive a license from an independent regulator. Now, is that fact or is that fiction? Results coming in. I have a feeling you guys are going to get this right as well. And unanimously, again, you guys did. So that is a fact. As what we're doing right now, or what we're proposing right now, is just that. It is a proposal and it is outside of the scope of our current license. So it's not something we are allowed to do under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act and the authority of the CNSC. So that is why we're in an environmental assessment process right now. We are drafting an environmental impact statement and making an application for an environmental assessment result and a licensing amendment decision. Until we receive those, we cannot proceed with in-situ disposal of the reactor. We do require that license amendment, and that is the process that we are following right now. So that is a fact. We cannot do anything without a license or a license amendment from the CNSC, the independent regulator. Now the next one, fact or fiction. Some decommissioning of WR-1 has been conducted since it was shut down in 1985. So some decommissioning of WR-1 has already occurred since the facility was shut down in 1985. Is that fact or is that fiction? Some of you may have worked here during that time, so you may have an unfair advantage on this question. But I do think, again, you're so far been a pretty smart audience and very well informed. So I think you guys are going to get this right as well. And you did not disappoint. That is, of course, fact. When it was shut down in 1985, it was moved into storage with surveillance. So in order to do that, some phase 1 decommissioning had to occur. So that was basically to render the facility inoperable again in the future, and to remove a lot of the extra equipment and hazards, including all the heavy water, removing the majority of the organic coolant, as well as removing all fuel from the facility. So the reactor does not contain any of those significant hazards anymore, and most of the major equipment has been disabled so that the reactor can't be fired up again, really. Now, last one for today, fact or fiction. Upon completion of the project, CNL will walk away from the site. Fact or fiction. Upon completion of the project, CNL will walk away from the site. So the results coming in here now. We'll see if you guys are all on the same page again. And it looks like majority of you said fiction. And that would be correct, fiction. So once the project is over, CNL is not simply washing its hands of the site and walking away. CNL is an ongoing entity that, while we are headquartered at Chalk Rivers, we will maintain responsibility for ensuring that the post-decommissioning monitoring program is implemented and maintained. So there will be a presence at site doing monitoring of groundwater, taking samples, not just as part of the WR-1 project, but as part of the overall Whiteshell site closure project. The institutional control period that has been proposed is a minimum of 100 years, and that 100-year minimum is to allow us to verify our predictive models against actual field conditions, to show that either the facility is performing as we intended, worse than we intended, or better than we intended. We do fully expect, based on the way we've put conservatism into our projections, that it will be performing better than we expect, but it will take 100 years of data collection to prove that and verify it. So that's why we proposed that for at least 100 years, CNL will be here, we will have a presence, and we'll be monitoring the site. So we will absolutely not be walking away from the site at the completion of the project. But that brings us to the end of our fact or fiction statement. So this was a new thing for us, trying to be more interactive. So I hope it was enjoyable for you guys. We're at the Q&A section of our session. So if you guys have any questions, additional questions other than what you've seen here, please, by all means, drop it into the Q&A and we will try and answer them for you. We have myself here to answer questions. We've also got Brian Wilcox, our director of WR-1 and NPD reactor decommissioning projects. And between the two of us, we should be able to answer just about any question you guys can throw at us. I don't see any questions in our Q&A section, but I'll try and fill the space for another 15 or 20 seconds to allow people to drop some questions in. I don't know if the questions don't also, they don't have to be limited to what we've seen here today. We covered some of the more regular statements that we hear from our public and Indigenous engagements. That's by no means everything we've heard. So feel free to anything that comes to mind. I know an additional one that comes up once in a while is, what if something goes wrong? If we have that 100-year monitoring period, and during that time, we start seeing stuff coming out of the reactor facility that we did not expect, and that is, it's not a simple if this do this. It's more of when we see something that we weren't expecting, we look at it more frequently. We look at it in different places. We basically increase our monitoring to make sure we understand what we're seeing and why we're seeing it. And then from that point, we can make decisions on what to be done about it. In some cases, it could be as simple as continuing to monitor. We could do a pump and treat type of process where we would collect groundwater and treat it to remove any contaminants. Or there's always, and this would be highly unlikely because we don't expect anything would be required for that. But there's always the possibility that the facility could be cut up into chunks and removed if that would ever be required. But it's highly unlikely that would ever be necessary. More likely it would be that we would just continue to monitor. So my ranting there has given me given you guys an opportunity to drop some questions into the chat. So we're going to answer some of them now here. So what is the current timeline for submission of the EIS? And so that one's we've had to make some adjustments relatively recently. We have made some decisions to extend our engagement period with some of our Indigenous communities to make sure that we've properly incorporated a lot of the feedback that we're receiving. So we're looking right now at resubmitting our environmental impact statement to the CNSC at late summer, early fall of this year, to make sure that we have time to properly incorporate some of the feedback that we've received. So late summer, early fall, which would put a hearing and decision in the time period of late 2022 or very, very early 2023 at this point. So I hope that answers your question. The next question here is, when is the entombment activity due to be completed? And I will try and interpret this, forgive me, to understand if that's when would we actually be done physically pouring grout into the reactor. And if that's not the intent of your question, please feel free to follow up. If that is the intent, we cannot start that process until we get a license decision, which we, again, expect late 2022, early 2023. So we could start at that point, which would put us completing the actual entombment or the grouting of the facility in the end of 2024, 25, 26 standpoint, probably 24, 25, with demolition of the rest of the buildings coming in 25, 26, project wrap up at the end of 2026. So that's the current projected timeline, but it is based on the assumption that the CNSC hearing has a positive outcome and that it occurs in that late 2022, early 2023 time period. The next question we have, you had mentioned that after the in-situ decommissioning, the area would be considered a waste disposal facility. What does that mean? It is that the facility would still continue to be licensed. There would be radioactive materials here. It would be a waste disposal facility, meaning that there will be materials here. It will have a license and with no intent of retrieving them, as opposed to, say, a waste storage facility where the intent is that they would at some point be relocated somewhere else, or that additional work would be done to put them into a final disposal configuration. A waste disposal facility means that this will be in its final disposal configuration with no intent of having to retrieve it or relocate it. And then the next question, has COVID changed a lot of what you have to do and how long it will take? That's an interesting question, and I'll let Brian jump in on the end here to give his thoughts on it as well. But a lot of what we're doing on the WR-1 project right now is planning work. So a lot of the work we do is computer-based. It's through meetings and conversations. COVID has taken our usual town hall style meetings where we like to get everyone together and talk face to face. And you can see we're doing a lot more webinars these days. I'm at home working from home myself. So COVID has changed how we've done things, but not a lot of how long we expect it to take. I mean, there has been some delays in terms of time to get settled into the new normal, but overall, that hasn't had a significant impact on the path forward for us because we're still heavy into the documentation and the planning, a lot of which can still be done remotely. And Brian, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that one.
No, I think you covered it all. I mean, yeah, when we conduct physical work, which we are not authorized to do yet on this project, then, and if COVID is still a issue at that time, then certainly there is extra controls that have to be put in place for people that are working close to each other. So that's the case now with other projects on site. You know, distance, time, protective equipment, all become part of the considerations that we make on ensuring safe work happens. And if COVID continues to be a global pandemic, when we get to execution on WR-1, the same considerations will be made then.
Excellent. Thanks, Brian. So that takes us to the end of the questions that we have in the queue here. That doesn't mean by any means you guys should stop dropping them in there if you continue to have further follow-up questions. If you do have questions you can think of after today's presentation, as Keith mentioned in the beginning, we do have an email address for you to submit those questions to, and you'll see it at the end of the slides here as we go through. But if there are no more in the queue here, we will move on to the last bit of interactive part of our webinar today. And we just want to get a little bit of feedback from you as our audience to make sure that we're addressing your requests for how we present the information to you and giving you the information that you want to hear. So with that, I will turn it back over to Keith to take us through our feedback session.
Thank you, Jeff. We do have a couple of feedback questions for you. The first two are yes/no questions, and the last one is intended to be a multiple choice one, and it's really geared to helping us ensure that we're providing the content that you want to have and that you feel that you need. Our first question is, do you feel adequately informed about the WR-1 project? I'll just leave about 20 seconds for you to be able to answer that one. Okay, that'd be about 20 seconds there. And we thank you for your answers on that one. If there are aspects of the presentation that you would like more information on, please email us at wlcommunications@cnl.ca. On to our next question. Do you believe that CNL is doing a good job in protecting the environment? And this is a three-part one. You may say yes, no, or you may not be sure of that. And it's a one choice question. And again, if you do answer that CNL is not, or that you're not sure, please include or please send us an email at wlcommunications@cnl.ca to share your concern. Thank you very much for your responses, and we'll move on to the next question. This one is intended to be a multiple choice. Answer as many of these as you like. At a future webinar, I am interested in hearing about the following: a town hall style where questions on any topic can be asked, a virtual tour of the WR-1 reactor, a history of the construction and operation of the reactor, details on the proposed grouting process, a deep dive into the safety case, or another topic, please write it into the question and answer chat, or alternatively, you may email it directly to us at wlcommunications@cnl.ca. Please take the next 20 seconds or so to provide us with as many of the answers as you wish. This is a multiple choice question. And we'll leave it about another 15 seconds to give you an opportunity to respond. Okay, I think that that would take care of the responses on that one. We thank you very much for your input, and we look forward to hearing from you by email. This brings to an end our session on the WR-1 decommissioning project. Stay tuned for future webinars on the WR-1 decommissioning project and the Whiteshell Closer project as a whole. We hope you found today's session informative and invite you to submit any further questions or feedback to wlcommunications@cnl.ca. We would love to hear your feedback in order to make these sessions as effective as possible. The email address can be found at the bottom of the chat box or also on our external website, cnl.ca. The video of today's session will be posted on our external website, cnl.ca, and attendees will also receive this link and a feedback form by email within the next few days. Thank you very much for your interest in the I'm sorry, Brian.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just noted another question came into the Q&A.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that question. So the question is, can we talk about the process for in situ disposal of the trenches? So yeah, I can definitely give an update on that. So for the benefit of the other attendees, one of the waste storage structures that exist in the waste management area at the Whiteshell Labs are called trenches. These were essentially clay-lined trenches in the ground where waste from the facility was emplaced over a number of decades, going back to the 1960s. And when the trenches were full, they were covered with a clay cap, and they've been under monitoring in the waste management facility for some time. Back when the original environmental assessment was prepared for the decommissioning of the overall Whiteshell Laboratories site, it was proposed at that time and agreed to that of the 25 trenches that exist, 21 of them were likely suitable for permanent in situ or disposal in place. Basically, that means not to touch them, perhaps apply a greater cover on them, but to not recover the waste. For 4 of those trenches, at that time, it was planned that the waste would be recovered because they were not suitable for permanent disposal where they exist now. So CNL is undertaking the planning now to prepare for developing a safety assessment to demonstrate that permanent in situ disposal is suitable for those trenches. Characterization is happening, past records are being reviewed, and that safety assessment work is underway. CNL also does plan to reach out to the public on an engagement perspective on this particular project. So there will be some opportunities to learn more about the project and to be able to ask questions about it. I hope that answers the question, Mike. If it doesn't, if I didn't address specifically what you're looking for, feel free to reach out directly to myself or to the WL Communications email, and we'll be happy to get you more information. A new question from Rhonda. Thank you, Rhonda. Does CNL have plans to leave behind a legacy for the community? Sorry, Jeff, I see you jumped into the QA. I'll start off here unless you had something to offer there, but I'm not exactly sure what you mean, Rhonda, and maybe we could take it offline. Certainly within the context of the contract that CNL has with ACL to decommission and close the site, there's an obligation on CNL to support economic development in the region with the intent to try to create other sources of economic benefit that could help replace to some degree the overall loss that would occur in the region from the Whiteshell site. So CNL has been contributing in a number of ways, including supporting the Regeneration Partnership Committee. If there's something more specific that you're thinking of there, maybe you could type it in, or certainly we can talk about that more offline. Any other thoughts from any of my other colleagues on the call on that?
No, Brian, I think you cover all the major points there.
I'll give it some more thought, Rhonda, and I'll also chat with our GM, and if something else comes to mind, we'll reach back to you directly.
Thank you, Brian and Jeff. And once again, thank you all for attending this webinar and providing your questions and feedback. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you again for your interest in the WR-1 reactor decommissioning project and for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.